Calvert County is a Washington, D.C. area suburb. Queen Anne's County is also increasingly suburban in its character, including people that work in, for instance, Anne Arundel County or other counties, but live in Queen Anne's County. Anne Arundel County, of course, heavily shaped, heavily influenced by the federal government. And by the way, one could argue that the Baltimore metropolitan area is destroying the country. So lately, what have been the big issues? The big issues have been National Security Agency. Well, that's in Anne Arundel County, right? Spying on everyone, so on and so forth, which I think is a good idea. But the point is, other people don't. And then the other agency that's been causing a problem, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, is Healthcare Reform. That's in Woodlawn. So Baltimore basically is destroying the country. Set that aside, St. Mary's County obviously heavily influenced by the federal government, as is Charles County. Now, Talbot County is doing okay here, 6.4%. And one of the reasons I think Talbot County has come back pretty well in the past year, Talbot County is extremely affluent. And yesterday the stock market set another record. It was up 55 points yesterday, now well above 15,800, creeping up towards 16,000 on the Dow. And so that has benefited Talbot County. And then Charles County is another Washington, D.C. area suburb. So that's where you see the lowest rates of unemployment. Where do you see the highest rates of unemployment? Rural Maryland, particularly on the Eastern Shore. Somerset, Dorchester, Wycomico, Caroline, Cecil, Worcester, Kent, all Eastern Shore jurisdictions, all with higher rates of unemployment. But again, my point is that if you didn't know anything else about Maryland, other than these counties are urban and these counties are rural, you would think the columns would be flip-flopped. North Dakota has the lowest unemployment rate in the country. Nevada, the highest. But that's exactly not the way it is in Maryland. We shouldn't take this for granted. And then you have to ask the question, well, why is rural Maryland different? Why is rural Maryland not performing as well as other rural communities across the country? There must be a reason here, and the reason I'll give you is public policy. That's my point. It's not that the people of rural Maryland don't work as hard as rural people in other parts of the country or anything like that. It's not that they don't want to live for themselves or their children or anything like that. It's not that the rural Maryland communities are not as beautiful as rural communities in other parts of the country. In fact, rural Maryland is much prettier than most other rural communities across the country. We have beautiful topography, so on and so forth. We have water, we have rivers, we have all kinds of things. No, there must be another reason afoot, and I believe that's public policy. This is employment growth for Maryland counties, March 2012 versus March of 2013. You might say, Anirban, why only March? That's the latest data available at the county level. I just want to point out some of the slow growth counties that are actually losing jobs: Wycomico, Somerset, Washington, Allegheny, Dorchester, Kent. Rural Maryland. Now again, you'd say, well, but Anirban, maybe that's happening nationally as well. Maybe the rural communities are not adding jobs nationally. I've shown you that's not true. Number one state in terms of job creation in percentage terms is North Dakota. Number two, well, whatever it was. South Dakota, I think it was, whatever it was. Now, here's another way of looking at things. Domestic net migration. We only have these data from the U.S. Census Bureau from July 2011 to July 2012. I apologize for the small type here, but we have 24 jurisdictions, only one slide here. So interesting thing. This is domestic net migration. So what am I showing you here? I'm showing you number of people who move into a community minus number of people who move out of a community, and I'm not including international migrants. So this is domestic net migration. So these are folks who've been in America. How many people moving into a community minus how many people are moving out. What's interesting is that the three jurisdictions where we see the most out-migration: Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Baltimore City. Interesting. Where are these folks moving to? They're moving to Howard County, Anne Arundel County, Harford County, Frederick County. That's where you see the flows of people by and large. But then you'll notice right here that there's almost no domestic net migration right here, these counties right here, in places like Somerset, Kent, Calvert, Wycomico, Talbot, so on and so forth. Worcester has some folks migrating in. Worcester has pretty low taxes and has a reputation for having one of the better school systems in Maryland. But by and large, you don't see a lot of energy in terms of domestic net migration. When you don't have population growth, it is difficult to generate overall economic growth. Now, I must say, rural Maryland is of two minds about this. A lot of people in rural Maryland don't want population growth. They don't want any growth. In fact, what do they want? Nothing to change. Not that things are perfect. Not that things are perfect, but any change would clearly be worse than the status quo, whatever the nature of that change. I understand it. And this must make it very difficult, economic life very difficult, public policy very difficult for rural decision makers. The notion that we see issues, we need to have some change, but the community doesn't want any. It's hard to make things better when people say no change. I understand that. But my point is that from a population perspective, from a migration perspective, rural Maryland is stuck in here, and there's very little going on one way or the other. Now, one of the reasons for this is because urban Maryland has said to rural Maryland, we don't want you to add population. There's something called self-determination. You know, people deciding what their communities should look like. And it must be frustrating for folks in various counties across the state to be told by the folks in Montgomery, Prince George's County, and elsewhere, this is what your county should look like. We'll make the decisions for our own county, but we'd also like to make the decisions for how you use your lands, how you use your natural resources, who gets to move to your county, so on and so forth, or how many. So, restrictions on well, septic, residential development. I won't go through this. You actually know this law better than I do. But you understand that this is very much targeting rural areas, places where there isn't municipal water and sewer infrastructure. That's very, very obvious. And one of the keys to economic growth, job creation, income growth, which is, by the way, the key. The key is income growth. If your stakeholders see rising income, they feel good about that. Their quality of life is rising over time. That's what people want to see. You know, not everyone, can be a hedge fund manager. Not everyone can be a Bill Gates, so on and so forth. But we don't have to be that to be happy. What we'd like to see over the course of time is progress. So if I've been living in a 3-bedroom house, I want to stay living in a 3-bedroom house. If I lose that house and I'm forced to move into an apartment, that makes me very sad. If I started out in an apartment, then being in the apartment, I don't feel so bad. But having been in the 3-bedroom house, now I feel bad. You see what I'm saying? It's all relative. People want to make progress. And along what dimension is progress most important at the household level? Income. Restrictions on agriculture and cultivation. Restrictions on agriculture cultivation. MDA has proposed a regulation, effective date January 2015, that will replace the P-site index with a phosphorus management tool. Do I understand any of this? I don't. Which is designed to be more sensitive to the potential for P, which is phosphorus, to move from a farmland. Okay. Now, I must tell you, the Maryland State Legislature is very, very creative. For time immemorial, literally thousands of years, dictators, emperors, kings, queens, tribal chieftains, the shogunate, tried to figure out, how do I tax rain? Because if I can tax rain, I have a pretty stable source. I can build houses and finance armies. Thousands of years, no one had been able to figure this out. The brilliant minds of the past. But in 2012, the Maryland State Legislature, right here in Annapolis, we finally figured out as human beings how you tax rain. You get people on the bounce. The question has been, how do you tax? You can't get it while it's in the air. Maryland figured out as soon as it hits your property, that's yours. That's yours. That's on you. It's on your property, isn't it? Well, then you get taxed on that. That's you. Limit the use of organic fertilizer if the likelihood for P movement, P is phosphorus, movement is high. Prohibit mitigation force in the high category for use in the high, whatever that means. Disallow the 3-year crop removal calculation. Approximately 140 soil samples taken from the lower eastern shore counties were analyzed by UMD, University of Maryland researchers, using PMT, this phosphorus management tool. A large percent scored high on the PMT risk scale. This would prohibit the use of additional phosphorus on these fields. This will result in farmers having to discontinue the use of organic fertilizer even if the crops need the nitrogen, and they will need to purchase commercial nitrogen instead. And no analysis has been done on the overall impact to the bay of substituting commercial water soluble N for the slow-release organic N currently used. In other words, we have no idea whether this will make any difference whatsoever, but we're still going to impose this on the farmers. That's what we do as a state. That's what we do. An organic grower, and by the way, I always thought organic growers were the good guys. But an organic grower said that he will have to take land out of organic production under this new rule, as he cannot get organic N without P attached to it. Again, I have no idea what any of this means. It just doesn't sound very good to me. This is what we do to rural Maryland. And by the way, I don't think rural Maryland is really up to policies. You see something similar, by the way, in Queen Anne's County, don't you, with the Four Seasons development? Now, you may think that that's a very bad idea, the Four Seasons development.